Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another round of sound. This is the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm Bob Pompeani. Much to get into tonight. We'll talk about the return of Andrew McCutchen officially. We'll talk about load management in the NBA and why it's a topic this week. We'll get into that. Tristan Jarry and the Penguins. You know, he's going to be a free agent. How much could he be worth, and how important is he to a deep run? But the #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown will be the official return of Matt Canada as your offensive coordinator for the Pittsburgh Steelers. And here to debate it is your panel. We have Andrew Fillipponi from the PM team. To the far left, in between, it's Jeff Hathhorn, sports director of 93.7 The Fan, and Chris Mack from the Fan Morning Show. So, gentlemen, good evening to you. Thanks for being here. I want to start with you, Jeff. Matt Canada, it's not, I mean, we've been talking about this for a long time, but it officially happened. He's your offensive coordinator. Your thoughts about him returning for another year after a season in which this team did not average a lot of points, but got better as the year went on.
And they did get better, and obviously that saved his job. If you would have looked at him at the first half of the season, he's not going to be here if that would have continued throughout the span. But what I think the other thing that really sticks out is you heard what Kenny Pickett said to Cam Hayward, said to Pat Bostic, said to numerous people about how he looks forward to that relationship, and I think that cemented his opportunity here. Obviously, the Steelers were listening to see if their offensive coordinator was making a difference with their first-round pick.
I don't know if that's necessarily the only thing you can take into consideration here, though, guys. Is that's great that Kenny Pickett says publicly that he likes Matt Canada and likes working with him. I think you have to ask yourself, is he going to get the most out of Kenny Pickett? And I don't believe that this is an offensive coordinator that's going to push Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, the offensive, anybody on that side of the ball to the next level. I think there will be stagnation. They will plateau, and hopefully it's not in Kenny Pickett's second year. This is the offseason where we're supposed to see the most growth in a quarterback, right? From his rookie year to his second year, full offseason in the system and everything. I hope we get the exponential growth some people think Pickett is capable of, because I don't trust that Matt Canada is going to be the guy to extract it.
But that offseason is with Tony Racioppi, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, that's not really with Matt. And I think part of what we saw from that offense was more about what Mike Tomlin said. Here's what I want you to run.
Right.
Here's what you need to do.
That was going to be the word.
Are we on late enough where I can get away with more words? Do we know? Are we past that threshold?
No, I would not.
Because that's what I want to do right now.
Can't.
I
don't want to be associated with it tonight.
You assured
I have
me.
to answer the question.
You assured me that this guy was going to get fired, Bob.
I thought he was.
Where was that? What happened here? Settling for mediocrity. That's what they're doing. This guy, his resume in college football, he had one good year, happened at the exact right place. He was 6 other places. He's got 1 year as a top 20 scoring offense in college football. He wasn't good enough for LSU. One and done there. 2 years later, they win the national championship. He's not good. How many times did you sit with Chris Hoke after a football game and say, Pat Freiermuth didn't get one target in this game? George Pickens saw the ball 4 times? What are they doing? I mean,
they got better, and that's the only thing that Jeff said was saving his
against
job.
who did they get better?
I'm just telling you.
You know what I mean? I think that's a big part of it.
It has to be the justification was that they got better, they ran the ball well, which can serve him well, Kenny Pickett well, moving forward if this continues.
Well, so, I think if we take the time to pop a couple nitroglycerin pills and cool out for just a second, I appreciate that you're upset, Andrew. I think we have to push forward now and say, okay, if we're stuck with this guy, how do they succeed and how much can they succeed?
But Jeff just said it doesn't matter because Mike Tomlin basically tells the guy, how high do you want me to jump, Mike? That's it. He's basically a puppet. That's what Jeff's making it out to be. But I think
aren't most assistant coaches puppets to their head coach?
But I compare Matt Canada's abilities as an offensive coordinator to Trubisky's as a quarterback. They didn't trust Mitch Trubisky to do things because Mike Tomlin really didn't think he was that good. And I think that's what comes into play with Matt Canada. If he was left to his own devices and he had license to call whatever play he wanted out of the playbook, what would we still have? What would we be left with?
More jet sweeps.
That's what I mean. Yeah. Like, we don't have a guy that's an Andy Reid disciple, a Doug Peter. None of these, all of these great offensive minds, Kyle Shanahan. Chad Henne goes into a game, Bob, they go 98 yards.
I saw it was a tremendous drive.
What are we talking about? Brock Purdy's Mr. Irrelevant. We come up with all these excuses for the Steelers. A team down 3 offensive linemen today drove the ball at will on the Bills. Right. We come up with all kinds of excuses for middling results for the Steelers, including keeping this offensive coordinator.
Are they excuses or are they reality? Is it a team that had mediocre talent on offense, whereas the Chiefs don't have mediocre talent on offense. Or
Let me ask you a
mediocre
question.
offensive line.
Whose receivers would you take? Deontay Johnson, George Pickens, or Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Juju Smith-Schuster? You don't think that's close?
Well, they have others too.
They have
Kadarius
others.
Toney was somebody they brought in,
I
and
get
they
that.
liked him
And
a
if you're
lot.
going San Fran,
I'm just-
Deebo Samuel's by
And
far
so is
better
Ayuk,
than any
Brandon
of those,
Ayuk. They
any of the
got,
guys
but
on
the
the
point is,
Steelers
I
roster.
understand your point, and I'm proud of you for not using another
Deebo
word
Samuel,
that we get in trouble
Deebo Samuel and Brandon Ayuk weren't first-round picks, though. A lot of it has to do with scheming guys open. They
Right,
do
and
that.
nobody does it better than Kyle Shanahan. Real quick.
What
I'm
did
gonna
we
move on to
think
something
Jalen
else.
Hurts was before this year? We thought he was a mediocre quarterback,
I didn't.
right?
But
Ton of
I
weapons
didn't.
around him.
Johnson and Pickens weren't
Excuse me.
first-round picks
I picked
either.
them to go to the Super Bowl. Do you remember that? I did. Because I like Jalen
Oh, yeah, let's
Hurts.
just call a timeout on the second.
You said nobody. You said nobody. I'm not
No,
nobody
I'm saying,
here. I'm just telling
I'm
you.
saying
I got-
last
loves
season,
Javon
did you
Hargrave.
think
Yeah.
Jalen
Yeah.
Hurts was
All
an
right.
upper echelon quarterback?
I want to move on to from what we saw from these four AFC teams this weekend. Okay, all elite, talented teams. You think? Where do the Steelers stack in, and how can they close the gap, Chris? On that,
They're not anywhere near those four. I think.
you don't think there could be growth to the point if let's just say that Pickett takes it to a different level, they add another
If-
wide receiver, and it's somebody like an Addison. They got young guys all over the place. You can't see a system where it gets better.
I can
Wait
see
a minute, did you
system-
just say Addison?
Yes. I'm saying hypothetically, if they get a guy like him.
You
in
think
the
that's
draft.
possible?
I don't know. I'm just saying hypothetically.
Addison won't be around at 17.
Well, they'll
I don't
get
think.
some other receiver. They're not
think
going
if
to
he
go
was
without
there, they'd
drafting a
take him?
receiver.
I would hope they would take a lineman. I would not.
I'd go
Just to
offensive
be clear
tackle
about that.
first, pure
yes,
and simple.
Yes, I'm with you.
But anyway.
My point is this. I can see them being a wild card team next year. Again, we're talking about the limitations of an offensive coordinator who I don't think is going to extract the most out of Kenny Pickett, Najee Harris, Pat Freiermuth, George Pickens, all those weapons on that side of the ball. So will there be incremental growth? Sure, there will be incremental growth. I think that's a given. Will there be the exponential growth needed for them to be a divisional round team next year? No, there won't. So I just have to satisfy myself that if they get to the playoffs, that'll be okay and that'll be good enough.
Well, I think that Mike Tomlin's going to look at the AFC game today and say, that's us next year. Look how great that defense was. They held Buffalo basically in check the entire game, and they controlled the line of scrimmage, dominated in the trenches, ran the ball at will, and won the game that way. I think that was his formula all year, and they beat the Bengals in week 1 doing that. So do I think they can be better than Jacksonville? Yeah, both teams won 9 games this year. But look at the Steelers' matchups against Kansas City. I think Patrick Mahomes is 3-0. It's 14 touchdowns, 1 interception.
It's pretty lopsided. But you can say that about a lot of teams he's gone up
Yeah,
against.
I'm not going to say they're Mahomes or they're Cincinnati yet, but I think they can compete with Buffalo from what we saw over the last
Buffalo
few
is a
weeks.
little bit of a
Well,
disappointment.
when we saw when those two teams played, they looked like they were in different
yeah.
games.
But
they
I
were.
think the Steelers were in a different spot than they are now when they played in Buffalo at that time. I think they're different. They're ascending. I think they're playing better, and I think they also play a third-place schedule, which will help them out.
They should. We got to take a break on that note. When we come back, we're going to talk about Andrew McCutchen is back in town, officially signed, made a press conference. We'll get into that and more as we continue right here with the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown.
#1 Cochran Sports Showdown is brought to you by #1 Cochran. Go one better.